Today's event is going to primarily be a live Q&A session. But to get us started, I'd like to introduce Mike, and we're going to do a quick presentation on Miso's progress and a little background of the company. With that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Mike. How are you?
Excellent. Thank you, Justin. Thanks for kicking us off. Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm Mike Bell. I'm the CEO of Miso Robotics. I'm very glad to have you join us today. While I'm giving you kind of an update on the company, you may notice in the bottom right, you can type in your questions there. We'll be turning to your questions. This format is one where we're going to provide a high-level update of the company and how it's going, and then get you the opportunity to ask anything that's on your mind. So, without further ado, I'm gonna dive in and just kind of start at a really high level. Most of the people on this call are prospective investors, but there's maybe 25% that are prospective re-investors.
Yeah.
We've got roughly a fourth of our investor base is made up of people that decide to invest again in additional series.
That's me.
Whether you're getting to know Miso for the first time or you're getting an update, welcome.
Excellent.
We design, manufacture, and sell artificial intelligence powered robotic automation products for the restaurant industry. Okay. We're grateful to be supported by over 20,000 shareholders. This company's been funded in large part by retail investors like yourselves.
Fantastic.
And
the future
helped us build something really exciting.
The future, guys.
We started the business about 6 years ago. For 5 of those 6 years, the company's been in.
I think this is a really good point. This company has been funded mostly by retail investors. I think it's over 80 million now of retail investors' money. We are an army of retail investors, guys. So just even if you've only got $1,000 to invest or less, maybe you want to invest with your brother, your sister, your friends. Retail investors make a difference. Let's continue to hear what Mike Bell, the CEO of Miso Robotics, has to say. Keep watching, guys.
Heads down R&D mode, developing the products that we're now taking to market. This year, our 6th year, 2022, we began commercially deploying our first robotics product, Flippy 2. We have 4 products, 3 are in development, 1 is in the market. Okay, and the one that's in the market that gets most attention is Flippy 2. It's an automated fry station. It's installed in back of house quick serve restaurants, QSR quick serve restaurants, as well as fast food restaurants. It stands up over a pre-existing fry station, essentially overnight. And it takes over the job of what is typically during peak period a 2-person job, and it takes that down to less than half a person job. Essentially takes over the entire fry station. So the timing of what we're doing could not be better.
And guys, if you haven't seen Miso Robotics, then definitely watch the whole of this video. But afterwards, check out my other videos on Miso Robotics, their products, and the other webinars. I've got a whole treasure trove of investor information that you can take a look at on my YouTube channel. Progress is everything. But let's continue.
There was a labor gap in the market before the coronavirus pandemic. It was a top 5 problem in the restaurant industry. The restaurant industry was constantly talking about the high turnover, the difficulty in recruiting people. Enter the pandemic in 2020 and kind of fast forward to today. There's been a societal shift in the labor market where people across the industry in many sectors have largely abandoned jobs that simply don't want to perform anymore. And the quote-unquote labor gap has turned into what's called the labor crisis. It is the single biggest issue facing the restaurant industry worldwide. There are no other solution to this labor crisis other than automation. There's just simply no scenario where anyone in the industry feels that there's going to be 1.6 million people suddenly and happily returning back to the workforce. So all eyes are on Miso. The entire industry is looking at Miso saying, your automation products single-handedly solve this problem, kind of one station at a time, starting with the fry station, moving on to the drink station, moving on to other stations. What Miso is doing is bringing automation solutions that allow restaurants to operate anew at full capacity, allows them to produce more food.
I think it's key that they're not the only company doing this. I've got other videos which cover some competitors, but I do think Miso Robotics is the best company in the space It's one that many of you, my current audience, invest in. It's one that is backed by so many people, so many retail investors. And it's also, there's a lot of companies that want Miso to work. You've got the biggest companies in the world in the restaurant, fast food, QSR space that want Miso to work. So I think they've got a lot going for them. Let's continue.
Less labor allows them, therefore, to sell more food. It allows them to have more stable operations. It's not an exaggeration to say the labor crisis, labor situation poses an existential threat to many restaurants in this industry. And so what we're doing is super important. It's also super timely. Okay. And we're in early days of getting these robots rolled out to the industry. And although this is a SeriesE plus, we're in early innings of solving this problem. We're going to be providing solutions to this problem kind of one station at a time for many years to come. So this is still a very early ground floor opportunity to get in on what we're doing. And what we're doing.
Yeah, I think the reason for that, guys, is that if you're the kind of person that wants to get in early on opportunities, although that, you know, they're still valued at quite a lot, I think it's $500 million in the US, that's considered a very small amount. If you look at some of the big companies in the world, especially in robotics and the market opportunity, which I'm sure they're going to go on to, you will see that this is a very big opportunity.
Doing very suddenly in 2022 crosses the borders of the United States. Because what's going on in the U.S. in terms of a $22 minimum wage hike in California and just this continual abandonment of jobs in this industry, it's actually more acute in certain parts of the globe. In Europe in particular, in France and the UK, the wage rates are higher and the labor shortage is even worse. And so we are being pulled by white hot demand into those international markets to begin deploying our solutions and begin solving the problem for them. So what that means for Miso is the addition of the opportunity to apply more capital to what we've built here to allow us to expand even faster into bigger opportunities. The fast food market worldwide is over $1 trillion. And you look at how big Asia Pacific and Middle East, North Africa, and Europe, it's a tremendously large pool of potential customers for Miso. And what you're seeing on the right of the slide is that we have pilots. Well, we've announced a pilot in Dubai that's being installed essentially now at a company called Americana. They operate Kentucky Fried Chicken and Carl's Jr. and Hardee's throughout the Middle East. They're, I believe, one of the largest franchisees in the world. We have a robot cooking food in a yet to be announced brand in Europe, and another one coming in France very soon. So this expansion is already underway, and it causes us to go build out supply chains and headcount and support engineers and installers in those territories, which brings up the opportunity for us to bring additional capital, to recruit additional capital to help serve this demand. The industry, when you look at it, you hear all kinds of companies talk about how big their addressable market is. It's truly astonishingly large in the restaurant industry. It's just the numbers just get really ridiculously big really fast. In the U.S. market, there's over 1.2 billion restaurants, and about half of those are fast food QSR restaurants. International markets are going to be almost 20 times as large. There's just
and guys, if you want to think about this, if you want to look at the numbers, these guys are producing machinery, robotics, AI for each restaurant. I think each product is retailing for about $2,000 or $3,000 a month. So imagine they have 3 robots in each restaurant. It's roughly $9,000-$10,000 a month, let's say, just for easiest sake. That's $10,000 a month. That's over $100,000 a year. It's about $120,000 a year. I mean, the numbers just get enormous. They really do. It's a bit like owning half an employee in 1 million restaurants in the US, you know. But instead of paying for that employee, Miso Robotics is the revenue source. They could be generating 10 grand a month from like 1 million restaurants. That is just, they could be generating literally billions of dollars in each country. and their profit margins are going to be huge as well, because they're a mixture of one-off installation costs and software, which is, again, we all know software is very high margins. I work for WhatsApp, big margins in software as well.
Enormous number of locations that serve human beings food day in and day out, and the humans that desire to work in those locations is a dwindling population. So enter automation. The way that customers buy our products is that, first of all, we explain, we have roughly 120 people in Miso, about 90 of whom are engineers, most of which are advanced degrees. We have exactly 0 salespeople. We have exactly 0 outbound demand gen marketing. All of our demand is inbound. The nation's leading global brands are in regular touch with me and my staff, and they are keeping tabs of what we're doing. So the first thing that kind of goes on is this initial engagement where we're talking to them over phone or over Zoom about what we're doing. And these conversations have largely been had with all the major brands globally. That leads to this analysis validation stage where we will prepare for them just a very simple kind of like economic study of what we do. And studies that kind of glamorizes a little too much. We just simply explain and show the metrics, how much food we can cook for what kind of cost per month. And that's quite compelling. What that then leads to is a pilot. These brands generally want to install one of our robots in their environment and run it for about 90 days. This gives them firsthand experience with the robot, its performance, its reliability, Miso's support, et cetera, et cetera. Once those companies go through pilot, and we generally know the answers to those pilots because we run those same pilots in our laboratory here in Pasadena, California. From those pilots goes rollouts, and so far 2 companies have gone through this process so far, with more coming. White Castle went through this process. They're our first customer, our first kind of put us on the map partner. They have signed a contract to buy 100 Flippy 2s.
That's
Okay,
good. 100.
one of our first customers. They've got a
So that's about over 3. I guess that'd be over 3 million, nearly 4 million, 3.6 million a year, something like that, of revenue. Not massively substantial, but this is I guess it's a pioneering brand. It's a brand that is paving the way for other brands to say, yes, I'll have 100 units, I'll have 1,000 units, whatever. 1,000 units becomes $36 million a year of revenue. 10,000 becomes 360 million. And there are plenty of restaurant companies that have 5,000-10,000 units. In fact, Chipotle has 32,000, I believe. No, wait a minute. It has, I think, 7,000 or 8,000, but it wants to expand to, tens of thousands. So anyway, let's carry on.
A handful of locations, they're running Flippies in every one of their locations. So in this pilot phase is, you can see some brands, Jack in the Box, Buffalo Wild Wings. These are companies that have made public that they're working with us. There are over a dozen companies that are in this same bucket that have not yet been made public. They've just chosen not yet to announce what they're doing. And so those announcements will be forthcoming. What you'll be seeing from Miso in the months ahead is a continual.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's some big brands here. The way Mike's talking suggests that they're bigger brands. Maybe it's a Pizza Hut, maybe it's a McDonald's, maybe it's a Burger King. Who knows? Maybe it's a KFC. If they're already trialing KFC with a franchise partner in the Middle East, and it works, why aren't they going to use it globally? And there's a lot of locations for a Burger King or a McDonald's or a KFC.
Slate of announcements of not only new products that Miso's bringing out, but new partnerships that we're launching. As these companies put a robot in their environment and come out of pilot, they generally prefer to make a press release about it.
And anyone that invests in Ally Robotics, you can see behind Mike, that looks to me like an Ally Robotics arm for the Flippy 2. Ally Robotics is a kind of sister company to Miso Robotics, supplying them with these incredible game-changing robotic arms. And I've got plenty of videos on Ally Robotics, and you can still invest in Ally Robotics as well as Miso. Why not spread your investment and invest in both?
You're going to see some of the nation's leading brands being attached to Miso in the weeks and months ahead. So
it's exciting.
We're opening up this SeriesE Plus. There's no thought or plan or intention to have an additional crowdfund after this. So this looks, you should view this as an opportunity a window of opportunity to invest in Miso, and a window that will not, there's no guarantee will stay open indefinitely. It's slated to close on November 18th, very, very shortly. Nor should you look at this window as opening again. Miso is raising capital to help expand. And what we're doing very quickly is growing our revenues from essentially, from a very, very low number. We have dozens of robots in the field, quickly getting to hundreds. And we are now in a rapid commercialization phase where you'll see us continue to grow in revenues, make announcements in the time ahead. So I hope that does an okay job of setting the stage for questions. I, at the span of time, of course, didn't answer anything and everything that goes on.
Yeah, so I think it's really, I just want to stop the video there to throw in some insight for you here, guys. Mike could be right here. It's very difficult to know whether a company is ever just going to make the switch to venture capital, or indeed owner funds, or indeed the revenue that's being generated by the company. If they do partner with somebody and get 500 or 1,000 stores, in a year, they may have enough income to start the rollout without investor funds. Even if there are future rounds, if you're like me, a retail investor, and it looks to me like most of my audience are retail investors, there's nothing wrong with investing now and investing up an emergency investment fund to know that, like, in a year's time, whether it's Miso Robotics, whether it's Ally Robotics, whether it's Blended, or some other cool companies that are coming out that have very good growth prospects, you're ready to invest, not just in this round, but in the follow-on rounds as well. Like Mike said, 25% of the investors are follow-on investors. I've invested in 3 rounds of Miso Robotics, or maybe even 4. Anyway, let's keep watching.
That you may be wondering about Miso. So I'm at your disposal. Justin, what do you have teed up?
Awesome, thanks. Trevor wants to know regarding Miso's expansion into international markets. Why did we decide to do this so soon? Why not focus domestically?
Yeah, it's an important question, and one that we aim to get right. The short answer is that in building up our supply chain and our infrastructure, we've always been doing that with an eye towards international expansion. And so as we are getting our supply chain and our vendor base set up, we determined that they were more ready than not to handle some of these expansion opportunities.
That's good.
My team has done a good job of making it easier than you might imagine. So when we install a robot in Southern California and then do one in the Northeast, they're 3,000 miles apart, got logistics and shipping and all kinds of things. There's not a tremendous amount more complication on it with going international. There are customs, there's some additional freight considerations, but it's generally the same machine that we've already stood up, just being stood up in kind of international soil. And again, it was always our strategic plan to go international. It was accelerated, frankly, because some of the nation's leading brands, some of the world's leading brands,
that's a clue,
are really pounding the table with demand that we just think it made good sense to say yes to.
Yeah.
Got it. Mike, you touched on this a little bit, but Adam wants to know what are Miso's highest priority countries to expand outside of the U.S.? And is there a big difference in how those plans could operate compared to Miso's American plans?
Yeah, sure.
Well, I'm going to take a stab at guessing. Now, there's 2 factors here, I'd say. There's population, which is a kind of natural signal into how many stores or operational stores that franchises or companies might have. So from a population perspective, India has a massive population. China obviously has a massive population, but it's maybe a bit too logistically difficult to go into China. But let's think about Europe. While Germany has a very big population, I think 70, 80 million, something like that. The UK has 66, 67 million. That's where I'm based. And there's obviously a lot of franchises here. There aren't that many populated countries in Europe, but I suppose if you think about France is quite well located. I think you mentioned France. Germany is also well located, where you have countries nearby that people might and they're quite frequented in terms of tourists as well. So maybe a Spain as well, that gets quite a lot of tourist travel. I wonder if there's any other countries that I'm missing. Indonesia is very obviously massively populated, Nigeria as well, but I don't think they're going to mention them as the first markets. I think it's going to be kind of a France, Germany, Spain, the UK, possibly. Let's see. I mean, yeah, let's see. I'm interested to hear.
US, United Kingdom,
Obviously,
and France.
Oh, there you go.
And Middle East in that order.
Okay, interesting.
Middle East has a different sort of labor problem. Europe has a very high cost of labor. And
yeah,
so
interesting.
when you look at restaurants at a high level, and this is a very rough metric to know, restaurants generally will look to have 30% of their P&L, their expense, attributed towards cost of goods, 30% to overhead, and 30% to labor. And that's kind of like the rough rule that we use.
Actually, I suppose from an expansion perspective, the UK, the US, and Middle East mostly will be covered in English. There'll be English speakers in Dubai, there'll be English speakers in the UAE, there'll be English speakers in large parts of the Middle East, and obviously English speakers in the UK and the US. So that's going to be a pretty smooth handover. When you get into internationalization, you have to also start thinking about localizing with language, supply chain, potentially. So that can be a slight issue. I know it all too well working globally for WhatsApp. But anyway, let's continue to hear what Mike says. I think he's basically talking about the cost base, and the UK has a very big cost base. You know, the minimum wage is very high, etc.
10% of profit. Well, the cost of food and ingredients in this world is undergoing inflation, just like the rest of everything else. Cost of labor is actually outpacing the cost of inflation. It's squeezing the margins of these restaurants. So they're now looking not only to break even, but a lot of them simply just are not able to hire the staff to actually hit their sales goals or operating goals. So for us, we looked at it and said, okay, maybe we should look at this as Miso as a global company earlier, and look at this as a global solution, and prioritize our customers based on kind of which ones have the biggest problems that are easiest to solve, and not let borders get in the way.
Right.
Thanks, Mike. Mark wants to know about the process of the valuation for Miso for SeriesE Plus. It's at 500 million. Can you give us an idea of how we come up with that valuation?
Sure. It's a mix of a number of factors. Okay, so if you look at the company, back in the Series C and Series D, we've grown in the last 2 years from like roughly an $80 million company to 420 to now we're approaching $500 million company. The combination of factors that influence that are, one, how much capital has been paid in the company so far, which is the answer is right around $100 million. Two, what are the number of products that we've actually developed? Because there's a big body of value there. The products that we've got, the products we had 2 years ago was essentially one product that was really not very much in market yet. Today we have 4 products. That's part of it. It's kind of the solution set. 3, how big is our
market
opportunity? Our pipeline can be measured in absolute dollars. It's well in excess of $100 million in terms of the value of the customers that are engaged with us right now. And lastly,
all right, so that if it's $100 million and they're making 50% margins, let's say, that's 50 million. And if you times that by 20, which would be a growth valuation, that's $1 billion valuation. If you go a bit more conservative and you say that, I don't know, 25% net margin, that's 25 million of the 100 million. If you times that by 20, hey presto, you get to 500 million. So it's maybe a forward valuation, i.e., maybe they'll get to that number in like 2 or 3 years. But for these companies to grow, they have to show growth, and I kind of understand the valuation keep going up because they are developing new products. Each product has a huge market, and I'm sure that they might talk about that as well. And if they don't, I've got videos on Miso Robotics products, and I think each of them is going to generate billions. So let's see.
Patent portfolio, our IP. We now have upwards of 25 patents. Some of them are very, very large omnibus patents with multiple claims each one. So the value of all of these things taken together is in a rough way, you should look at it as a formula of sorts, all contribute toward increasing value. The company compared to a couple of years ago when we were around $100 million company, 4 times many products, 10 times as big as pipeline, twice as big a patent portfolio, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And so all those kind of add up into an assessment of, okay, what is the value of what we built over the last 6 years in technology as well as go-to-market traction?
Thanks, Mike. To elaborate a little bit, Mark wants to know, is there an opportunity for a third-party valuation? And is that something, as a private company, is that something that we've considered or would consider?
Yeah, third party, the truth of the matter is there is no really good, reliable way for a private company to go to an outside party and get a number that is useful. Okay.
Yeah.
There are 409A valuations that are done largely for tax purposes, and they value largely the value of common shares. But these valuations are largely done for tax purposes, and what they do not contemplate is
the growth.
What is the value of the current security that's on the marketplace in terms of its fair market value to consumers?
Yeah.
There's just, for a company in our stage, we don't have the revenue multiples to substantiate the traditional form of value.
It's a future valuation,
We're
maybe 2 years or something.
And
Or
not
3
only that,
years.
a lot of companies in a lot of ways fall outside of normal valuations because it takes a ton of capital, a lot of years.
Yeah, it's a bit like Tesla. You have to invest 50, 100 million in something like this, and then hey presto, I don't know what Tesla is worth in 2022, but it's worth a lot. I think Elon Musk might be the richest man in the world, and I think Mike Bell will be very wealthy. I think there's maybe an 80 to 90% chance that this company is going to succeed. I think it really does largely depend on retail investors like me and you to back Miso Robotics. If they get another 10,000 investors investing $2,000 in this round, hey presto, they've raised 60 million. That would be, I'm sure, well enough for them to keep ramping. I don't think they're going to need 60 million. I think they're talking about 15 million or something. But I'm really strongly considering reinvesting, and it's going to be a very difficult decision for me how much to invest and where to invest it. But I'll come to that at the end of the call.
To bring their products to market. Other companies, you say like software-only SaaS companies, they oftentimes will bring $10 or $10 million in a Series A. By the Series B, they've got a product, it's a software-only product to market that's on the web, and it's kind of they're scaling. Robotics doesn't fall neatly into the way that the traditional companies are valued, and so what we use is essentially markets acceptance. When we put in public market securities like we do right now at the SeriesE Plus, we learn very quickly the appetite for investment, and we've oftentimes have oversubscribed and exceeded our fundraising goals based on market receptivity. That is more than anything else determines or it indicates frankly the market receptivity for the numbers that we're setting. I hope that helps and answers your question.
Thanks, Mike. Ash wants to know, can you give us an update on Cali Burger and White Castle? Miso's been working with them for several years, and the deployments, they're saying 4 to 5 deployments. Can you give us how many deployments do we have right now with White Castle and Cali Burger?
So Cali Burger, the number is 4, and that right now is essentially 100% of that chain. It's an early partner of Miso's and a big kind of friend of the family, if you will, because they partnered with us in adopted automation even before we had real products in the marketplace. So we've been a key part of kind of their overall offering as a franchise organization. White Castle is the first big chain that came along and decided to work with us early on and kind of helped us develop the product. We put our very first really kind of a beta or prototype version in a store a couple of years ago. They have helped us kind of work through the kinks to get the product reliable, get it functioning really well. And they were the first ones to sign a 100-unit rollout. Now they have around 350 locations nationwide, and they bought their first 100 from us. The pace of adoption is really, meaning how many per month, is really oftentimes gated by not just it's not gated by supply chain or really a Miso descent. It's the chain's ability to stand up new robots per store in a given month. We're early on. We've done less than 10 so far with White Castle. Castle, but we have their next 12, I believe, locations, and those are scheduled being installed in the weeks ahead. The way that White Castle is approaching is very much kind of like district by district, kind of what are the locations that are most ready for a robot. We're actually being put oftentimes in some of the busiest locations, the ones that actually could use the boost in capacity more than anything else. We're probably on track to get most of the 100 locations installed in 2023. But there's a lot of variables affect that, a lot of them over the customer. And we're really just following their lead in terms of their pace. Whatever they want works for us.
Thanks, Mike. Kind of a related question here from Andrew. How many total units of Flippy 2 are installed? And then is there he wants to know, are they operating fully, or are they in some kind of testing mode or evaluation mode?
Yeah, it's a mixed bag, which is why there's a number of reasons we don't like to quote exact units, precise units. It's around 24 is the answer. It's a couple dozen, but there's a mixed bag. About 15-ish of those are in live restaurant production environments, cooking food for human beings right now as we speak. Okay, others are in some form of innovation center, test kitchen in some corporate location. And then some of them are kind of in a mixed bag. They're in a location that may be a restaurant that is dormant right now. And so some chains have test centers. They have them set up for testing all kinds of equipment.
Yeah, so I think it's really important for investors or prospective investors like me and you. I'm a current investor, but it's to not necessarily focus too much on right now. Right now, I would say, if you think about angel investing in Miso Robotics versus investing in anything else, when you invest in a house or a share, you want to know more or less what it's doing right now, or maybe 6 months away or a year away. But investing in angel investments like Miso Robotics, it's more like, what's the future vision? Can one think about, these products like the arm you see in Mike's background here, and from the videos that I've shared, can you see that being in chains in your country, in your state, in your city, in places you travel to on holiday? And the answer is yes. It's a matter of time before they can deploy. And it's probably a matter of retail investors backing this company, year after year, 1,000, 2,000 every year. I don't know what the numbers is. For me, it feels like it's better for more people to invest a smaller amount, like 1,000, 2,000, than a small subset of investors investing big, because what I've seen with angel investing, when you invest very big, you start to really over question the everyday, over question the month on month, the quarter on quarter progress, rather than believing in the overall vision that the company is going to be able to execute over a 5 to 7 year period, which is really what angel investing is about. And when a company is doing something so unique like Miso Robotics, automation with robots, software as a service, over the internet, in the cloud, with AI and computer vision, and they're really solving a very complex problem, and it's probably going to take more than 6 years. They're in the 6th year now, so I'd say probably the next 5 years for them is going to be huge. But you can't really. I hope there's not too many questions on right now, because they need the capital now to deploy, to go international, and to set up installation teams all over the world, really, and particularly in the UK and the US and France.
And that's kind of their fit. Others just, many brands just put us directly in store right away. And so it's somewhat of a mixed bag. We're real clear and real public. We are very clear and we're very public about which ones have signed rollout agreements. And so far, that's White Castle and Cali Burger. But there are 2 more on track for signature and announcement yet this calendar year. And like I said, upwards of a dozen still in that pilot phase, some stage of that pilot period.
Thanks, Mike. Bill wants to know, is the $3,500 monthly subscription fee designed to make Miso profitable or to maximize adoption?
Well, both. This is not a philanthropy philanthropy. We run this like a real business. So we're absolutely taking very serious our need to take all this great technology, make money out of it. It needs to produce positive cash flow, and our products need to have a very good unit cost economic model. What that means for us is we put a robot in the field, it needs to come back and break even sometime in the first 2 years, very preferably in the first year. Okay. Now, as we get our volumes up, our unit costs go way down, and that intersection of incoming revenue per month and the cost of the unit is progressing very, very nicely. You can imagine the first 1 or 2 of these things we build, they're terribly expensive. A whole bunch of things are kind of prototyped or handmade or they're tested. And you can also imagine when we have production line, you know, when we're buying and manufacturing 100 of these at a time, the costs obviously go way, way down. So we're progressing through our normal evolution of kind of a lower cost model, and we're really comfortable with our unit economics. We feel like they're really, really solid, especially for a hardware/software company. Conversely, to the other part of your question, it works really well for a restaurant. If you ask a restaurant operator about kind of the cost of human labor, a real rough justice number is one human being working 1 40-hour shift for a month. That's generally around $3,000 to $4,000 a month, depending on where in the United States this person is working and what minimum wage is in that area. So if Flippy offsets 1.5 bodies, simple math says that's around a $5,000 labor offset, and we're pricing it underneath that number on purpose. We're also pricing in a way that's just dead simple so that the customer doesn't need any kind of complicated spreadsheet to understand this math works. Back and math that works first month. They install Flippy starts taking over the fry station. They feel it in operations, but they also know it mathematically without using Microsoft Excel, that it's a winning formula for them.
Yeah, strong answer.
Thanks, Mike. A couple more questions here on the product side. We obviously have recently announced, we've been announced the expanded product line, Flippy Light, Sippy, etc. Question about other automation opportunities inside of restaurants. This one's specifically about sandwiches. Can you give us an idea of how we're thinking about other kitchen automation tasks?
Yeah. It's a really thoughtful question. I appreciate the question. My team and I identified 24 distinct automation opportunities back of house.
Wow.
If you look at back of house operation for a typical fast food restaurant, we think the answer is right around 24. Now, about a third of those are computer vision, kind of non-robot automation opportunities. Think about just vision-based analytics that can report some really valuable information.
Dishwashing.
The rest of them are all full-on robotics. Okay, and so one of the most important things we look to get right is what is our progression through this list of 24. We obviously know with the team and bandwidth and focus that we have, that if we're overly ambitious and too aggressive on product releases, we'll do them slowly. And we also know that there's a really big market out there, that there's some oftentimes real advantages to being the first company to market solving some of these problems. So we have balance. What you'll see from us is that when we announce or we commence a product, we generally do so with known demand. So we've got kind of development partners like customers with us when we do that. There's a very heavy design phase when the product is essentially invented, it's designed, its mechanical design is created, then it's turned over to production. At that time, many or most of those design engineers spin off of this product and they become free to work on kind of the next product. And so this flow of continued innovation is very important for the Miso machine to keep working. It allows us to continue to have kind of an ongoing spate of new products, but without requiring very wild swings in our operating expense and hiring. It also prevents us from having an ebb where we have design engineers with not enough to do. So I believe the team's doing a really good job of getting that right. And what that means is you'll see more products being announced as the ones that we're developing go off to production. And a real quick word on that. So we have Flippy 2 that is in the marketplace. Flippy Light, also called Chippy, is being we're partnering with Chipotle for that solution. That is turned over to manufacturing. There is a product called Cook Right, which is a vision-based observation system, which helps companies like Panera work to get their coffee service and their coffee freshness optimized.
That's great.
And then the last one is Sippy, which is an automated drink dispensing station that helps the drive-through move process drinks significantly faster. These products are nearing the end of their design stages of being turned over to manufacturing, which means these teams right now, as we speak, are diving into the next product. The progression of product, meaning which ones we do next, we have a really good formula for that. We really look at what restaurants spend each month on a given function. So we kind of look at that as kind of like the revenue opportunity. And then we look at kind of the ease of design. Some of these things are really hard, some are really easy. Something like scooping ice cream, it's actually can be done, but it's quite hard actually from a form factor. Other things like cleaning surfaces, actually quite easy. And so that's part of our decision to what to do next. And you'll be seeing some exciting announcements from us in the beginning part of 2000.
Robotic cleaners, maybe.
Thanks, Mike.
That was probably a lot. Was that my longest answer ever, Justin?
I bet they're going to come out with something called Dishy.
But honestly, though, it's really interesting to think about
Washing dishes.
what kind of things it's easy to automate, and also, yeah, I think one of the most interesting things about Miso is we're all familiar with cooking food. You know, all of us cook, so it's kind of like thinking about what would it look like for a robot to scoop ice cream or make a sandwich, for that matter. It is interesting.
Yeah, and the thing to be careful of is if you're asked the question, can a robot do that? The answer is essentially always yes. But the important question is, can the robot do it economically? Can it do it in a way that really works for the customer? And that's the hard part to get right. Not a lot of robotics companies get that part right.
Thanks. I'm going to ask a couple of questions from John, and I'd like you to frame these as questions about Flippy too, although they could apply to the other products as well.
Okay.
What do you expect your product margins to be? And then also, what do you see as your biggest technical hurdle? Be it something we passed, or do you think there's a technical hurdle ahead of us?
Yeah, super good stuff to talk about. Okay, so a B2B software company. Imagine that you're a company's created an application, a web-based application.
Like WhatsApp?
Businesses. Those companies desire to have between 75% gross margin plus or minus 10 points. Okay.
Yeah.
That is a really good target gross margin for a software-only company. Okay. Then you look at the other end of the spectrum, a hardware-only company. Those companies oftentimes have less than 40% gross margins. Okay. So Miso is a hardware
Hybrid
software company. Okay. What that means is if you come look at one of our robots, you said, geez, it doesn't look that hard. I think you could have that made in China. Well, maybe not, but there's one problem. The software to run it is very difficult. It's complex software that takes a long time to get right. And that is the heart of Miso.
That's the intelligence.
Includes the motion planning, the physical movement of the robot, the computer vision, which means the awareness of where it is, the planning algorithms that sequence all the motions to get them right, and a lot of other layers of software. Okay, so we're a hardware-enabled software company whose product gross margins aim to be near the software-only applications that I mentioned, 70% range.
Yeah, fantastic.
It requires us to get to scale to get there. You can't get there when you're doing dozens of robots. But when we get our costs down and really get to volume, we aim to be in that same range, which is an enormous achievement for a company that's got a big honking physical robot that comes along with its software. Okay. So that was the answer to the gross margin question. The question regarding the complexity of the software, what are the challenges? They really all there's not one little clean answer that has to do with kind of the hardest part, but it's the way to describe kind of our next phase of challenge has to do with software and reliability of the robot. So if you think about a restaurant, they really don't spend any time worrying about the reliability of a dishwasher or a refrigerator or even a gas range. They just assume it to turn it on and work. We all know that technology today isn't always like that, especially early generation, like first generation or second generation technology. And so, like all technology companies that are kind of on the frontier, blazing new trails, our reliability is in the 90s, and it needs to be in the very, very high 90s. And that's our next transition. That's our next kind of threshold. So that when a restaurant comes in and plugs in a robot and turns it on. It just simply works day in and day out very reliably. It is now working reliably enough to earn rollouts. It's satisfying all the pilots that we have in place. But we're not there yet in terms of reliability, and that's the next phase of our journey.
Thanks, Mike. Super helpful. A related question here, a couple actually have been asked related to this, which is what do restaurants like and dislike about Flippy, and how does that translate to the employees at the restaurant? What do they like and dislike about Flippy?
Yeah, so when you install, they all want it to be smaller, and it will be. We're going to continue. We have a Flippy 2. Well, you can imagine we're not stopping there. There will be a Flippy 3. There'll be a Flippy 10 someday. Like all electronics, it'll continue to be smaller, lighter, cheaper. That's just what happens to technology. And so they all want it to be a little smaller, so it fits in more of their restaurant, and it will. What they generally, when you talk to a team member who's working alongside Flippy, what they'll often tell you, and they'll tell you right to your face, is don't ever try to take it away. When you put this in here, it's quieter, things are faster, smoother. The beeping fryers, the timers on the fryers, and the humans grabbing the basket and rattling and swinging around, all that goes away. There's a nice clear plastic barrier that separates the fry zone from everything else, and it frankly makes a more peaceful work environment. Workers love that. It just makes it less stressful, but capacity, goes up. What they hate most about Flippy is if you're in the middle of a very busy lunch cycle, and there's a problem where the robot goes down for a few minutes, you have to take over. If the robot goes down, which it does sometimes, you are not out of business in the fryer. You just have to lift the barrier, and humans, fry food just the way they always have, while the robot kind of reboot and reset. That happens in a restaurant maybe once every 2 or 3 weeks, but it's a bummer when it happens because it interrupts their flow, and it's kind of a bummer. So that's a real life example of kind of some of the challenges with what we're doing. And I don't want to overstate it. The pilots are, so far we haven't failed a pilot, knock on wood, and they're all so far, leading towards rollouts. But it's a real piece of modern day technology, no different than anything else.
Thanks, Mike. Last question before we move on to a different category here. Several people, as always, want to know about how we're going to maintain the speed of robots in the field.
It's surprisingly easier than one may think, and the reason is we're not building or hiring an army or a fleet of robot installers or service people. Our special ability as a company involves with is centered around identifying automation opportunities and inventing clever solutions for those automation opportunities. We're world class at that, and I honestly don't know any company that's a close second to that in the restaurant industry. So hiring a bunch of humans in vans with tool belts and parts is not a distraction that we need. So we've been able to leverage. So the good news is these humans with their tool belts and their vans exist in the world today. And they're calling on the very restaurants that need this installation servicing. So what we're doing is we are partnering with these third-party firms, and there is a patchwork of them nationally. And we identify them, we contract with them, we train them and certify them, we outfit them with parts, and they're already in there calling on the restaurant for the drink dispenser or the Wi-Fi or the refrigerator or whatever else. And so we train them to work on our robots, and it's not as difficult as it may originally seem, because everything in our robotic solutions is designed to be replaced at the component level. So there's no scenario when a service guy takes a robotic arm, puts it in the floor of a restaurant, and starts opening it up like surgery and working on the arm. What the service person does would simply be arrive with the replacement arm or a replacement gripper or a replacement camera or a replacement fill in the blank, swap that part out, send the part back to us, to our depot, we refurbish it and put it back in circulation. This kind of thing is remarkably easily done, and we've got in every installation that we have in the marketplace, we go live with a partner, a service partner in that local area the day that we install.
Got it. Thanks, Mike. Okay, this question is, does Miso plan to partner or invest with companies who build kitchens specifically designed for cooking robots or automation? This could make cloud kitchens more efficient. So instead of retrofitting kitchens, is Miso interested in, built from scratch automation kitchens?
We're in active discussions with all the major ghost kitchen or dark kitchen companies in varying degree of exploration and discussion. What's not imminent is a fully automated, autonomous kitchen. That's a heavy, hard lift. There are certain things that are pretty straightforward: ordering food, receiving food, even often, certain types of food prep like pizza is relatively straightforward. But things like moving inventory in and out of a restaurant, canned goods, recyclables, things like cleaning all types of kitchen and cooking surfaces. It's a long ways off before the entire unit is ready to be humans. It's maybe 10 years. And so what we're doing is our view is there's so many
big opportunity.
Going back of the house. Just look next time you go to a fast food restaurant, you look at back of house, look at those tasks. The average person can identify what is really machine work and what is kind of human work, and there's some gray area, but they're generally pretty easy to identify. Okay, that kind of thing is super repetitive, it's super consistent, it's feasible to see a robot taking over that function. So we believe that the way that the world will unfold and the way the world will evolve is to have more and more of these discrete solutions being put into existing restaurants. And so there won't be some sudden leapfrog where all of a sudden, restaurants open up and it's completely humanless. There's kiosks that kind of do that. There's some
blended
prototyping type, companies out there doing similar things, but they're still in the kind of experimental stage. But while they're doing this, there's 1 million restaurants in the U.S. alone that need help with the fryer.
That's right.
Help with the grill station, help with the dishwasher. And so we see the world unfolding in a way where more and more of these kind of point solutions, if you will, get put into the existing, an enormous restaurant world. All of these technologies and these products that we're releasing, even though they look like these discrete point solutions, they're all connected with the same underlying technology. They're all part of a connected Miso platform where the computer vision connects to one another. They're all connected to the point of sale system. They're all connected to our analytical cloud that runs analysis on the performance back of house. So these solutions are all part of a web platform, if you will, for essentially a very long product roadmap of continued releases that you're going to see from us for the next decade plus.
Awesome. Yeah, super helpful context. Dan wants to know, what risks does Miso see in managing additional growth, and specifically as it relates to competition?
Well, right now, there are no real companies, there are no clearly identified companies that are doing what we're doing in the commercial phase in the U.S. market. We just don't see any. But we also know that will change. This is an entrepreneurial country and world, and anybody who kind of looks at Miso's too and says, it's part of the realities of a capitalistic society where it's like other companies look at that, say, I can do that too, or I can do that better. So competition's coming, and I think that's inevitable. So we're in a big hurry to get as much ground covered while we can. So that shows up in rollout contracts with brands. That shows up with just perfecting our product, getting them rock solid. Got a 6-year head start on a lot of this technology, and that's super important and helpful. But it doesn't make us immune from competition. There will be, in the years ahead, this market share will be divided by other companies. I don't love that, but it's reality. So what we're doing, one of the reasons we're raising so much capital, is we're continuing to invest in the infrastructure, because we know the size of the prize in the years ahead has a lot of zeros behind it, and we need to get as much as we can while the get's good.
Yeah. That's right, and that's the reason.
And
one reason to consider investing.
This question: as Miso grows, what kind of challenges are on the roadmap? As what does Miso look like with 1,000 robots in the field, and what kind of challenges will exist at that scale?
A lot of them, candidly, because there's just so much that has not been done before. But I'll tell you that I look at challenges kind of in 2 phases. Okay. For the first 5 years, all the challenges the business is facing were technological feasibility challenges. Can we get this robot to do this thing with these parts at this cost, with this reliability, this throughput? Like they were theoretically possible. We ran them in models. It all made sense, but we hadn't done it. So we hadn't actually put robots in the field saying, voila, we were right. Okay. We crossed that bridge in about February of this year when we started producing such terrific results for White Castle that they began having a very high ROI on the robot they were buying from us and decided to buy 100 more. In that phase, when we rounded that corner, the challenges are executional challenges.
Yeah, agreed.
Hiring the right people, making the right decisions about outsourcing and manufacturing, supply chain and product pace, et cetera. These are execution challenges, and those I bring on. Those are more pedestrian in nature. They're challenges nonetheless. I don't want to appear at all cocky about what we have before us. We've got dozens of robots in the field, and we're on our way to having thousands. So that is going to strain the organization. It's going to have us create all kinds of new processes and team members and functions, and everywhere you look, IT, supply chain, HR, accounting. It's the challenges of rapid growth. They're fun challenges, and I'm really proud of my team. I've got hired true experts who've done this before and seen this before. Not necessarily in robotics. Nobody's done robotics in the restaurant industry before, but I've got people with the right track record and the right background that are avoiding a lot of the learning curve that's otherwise going to be presenting. So,
right.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, this question, I don't totally understand it, but I'm hoping you will. Do you plan to open source your programming SDK? That's
the APIs,
orchestration
connections
on top of your platform.
Okay, so open source is a category of software that basically means it's free to everyone. Okay, an SDK is a software development kit, and the answer is no, hell no. So we are, but let me explain with some more color. The software technology that we've built,
that's the IP,
rests upon what's called ROS, ROS, Robot Operating System. It's technically ROS 2, which is the second generation of robot operating system. That layer of technology is indeed open source, and one can go build software on top of it and use it essentially for free. And it's an important part of having a vibrant technology ecosystem where what companies are building works with other stuff other companies are building, and it doesn't put restaurants in some weird scenario where you got Windows or Apple and they're not going to work together, and you're kind of screwed if you pick the wrong choice. So because the foundation of our technology is built on ROS 2, we can go forward to the restaurant industry and go, okay, you're not pigeonholing yourself with us in this. But at a certain part of the technology stack, you draw the line and say, this is the absolute Chinese wall we're not crossing. Forgive the analogy, but it is an IP protected wall that is the heart of the value that we've built. We put up literally, it's like almost $100 million into the company getting where we're at, and a large majority of that is software technology and IP. Very proprietary, very much patented, very much protected, and much of it's defensible. That part we'll keep our own, but it also allows us, to the first part of the answer, to have an open API and kind of an open architecture system that works with other things.
Got it. Thanks, Mike. Another technical question here. What kind of algorithms does Flippy2 use, for instance, to decide whether the fried chips are ready or not? This must be an overseas investor here.
So the algorithms are all proprietary, and they sit in a number of different buckets, but I'll give you an illustration of one. So if you're a restaurant and you buy Flippy2 and you've got 4 fryers, each fryer has 2 baskets. That means you have 8 baskets of food. Each one of these baskets of food has a very short cook time, call it a minute and a half. Fast forward to peak period during lunch or dinner when every single one of those baskets is cooking food. Some of them might be cheese sticks with a 45-second cook time, and if you go over the cheese explodes, it's a big mess. Others are chicken that can be undercooked, or shrimp, and others are French fries that if they're 15 seconds overcooked, they're crispy brown. Getting these cook times exactly right isn't so difficult until you add into the fact that you're doing it 8 times in a row. It for hours on end, eight at a time. And so the algorithm here is a motion planning algorithm. It's like a scheduling or a sequencing algorithm that will tell Flippy, don't go grab that basket right now because you're going to be in the middle of a move when the cheese is done and you need to take the cheese sticks out without a 10-second delay or there's be a big problem. So instead of grabbing this basket now and starting a new cook cycle, just pause, chill, wait 10 seconds, grab the cheese, take it out, now go get the other food.
Interesting.
This sequencing is a never-ending kind of forward-looking game of chess scenarios where Flippy needs to make sure to get these movements right every time. They don't overcook, undercook food. And by the way, you got to do it without a lot of downtime because you need to hit a really high throughput goal, or the drive-through lane is going to be waiting. So this is one layer of algorithm that I think we can all kind of relate to. That just speaks to the value of the technology that we built. Getting this right is super hard. Why we're in this 6 years. What have you been doing for 6 years? Well, go watch Flippy cook 8 baskets and that'll start to answer your question.
Very good.
I love it. Yeah, thanks very much. Okay, question here. Sorry, I lost it here. Okay, Jeremy wants to know, does the 3x increase in the bottom line of a participating restaurant factor in possible negative variables? And if so, what are a few of the examples of variables that were identified?
Okay, so the way to look, to make sure that I'm characterizing the economic impact correctly for our restaurant,
anyway,
they may take over Flippy 2 and pay $3,500, a month as an example. They would have a labor offset, maybe of $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 a month, depending on where they are in the United States. Okay, but the other economic effect that happens is they don't send any laborers home. There aren't enough people to send home. So what happens is those people work other places in the restaurant and actually produce more food. Capacity goes up, so therefore sales go up. So overall, the business generates this really positive ROI. So this is
so it's cost savings and revenue growth,
but it's a really broad
for the restaurant
because there's a whole bunch of different factors. The price, for example, of Flippy varies depending on how many you buy from us and frankly what model and configuration you might be buying. So that's one variable. The cost of labor in New York City or Los Angeles is very different than it is in Arkansas or Iowa. So that's yet another variable. And whether or not the location has, it needs a minimum of 5 people to operate and we add the 6th, or they have 13 people and we kind of plug in there. There's just a whole bunch of different variables that apply, but we demystify it for restaurants. We make sure that they understand the ROI on their own.
Show must go on.
Require a series of convincing presentations or spreadsheets. We ask them, how's the robot working out for you? And if you want to buy some more.
Like it. Okay. 2 questions here about Miso's production capacity currently and how that might grow. So Jeff wants to know, based on supply chain and demand, how many units could you produce / install in a 12-month period right now?
Okay, so it's a moving target. So right now it's different from 2023 and 24. So right now we have capacity, we have manufacturing capacity and supply chain capacity to do dozens per month. Okay. We also believe we have most of the demand for 2023 largely taken care of by our suppliers in our vendor base. Okay. When you look at Flippy 2, there are kind of 3 categories of supplies or components that go into that. One is the robotic arm itself. We get those from a company called Yaskawa. They're a great partner of ours. They help us kind of customize the arm a little bit and configure it for us so we get it. It's kind of ready for installation. The second big category would be things that are made for us, like the frames, the barriers, the structure that Flippy kind of hangs on. Those are manufactured right now in Columbus, Ohio, and that's by a company called Wasserstrom that does all that fabrication for us. The third category are things we just buy. They could be cameras, the cables, fasteners, compute devices, routers, safety devices, things that all get kind of assembled inside of Flippy. These 3, when you look at them and go, okay, they're kind of 3 buckets of supply chain for us to go solve and say, okay, how high can you get per month based on our projections? and know, okay, at a certain point, then we'll need a second source supplier to handle, incoming demand, and then maybe a third source supplier. And some of these suppliers, by the way, will max out at 100 a month, and we'll have to get another supplier that has got kind of a higher threshold, a higher ability, capacity. I have a full team on this. They're a very seasoned team. They're, working right now to solve 2024 supply problems.
Got it. Thanks, Mike. I know we're running on time here. Just two quick things here. One, can you give us an update on how it's going with Chippy and Chipotle?
Yeah, we are. Chipotle took the unit, their innovation center, made a lot of public announcement about that, passed all flying colors, checked all boxes. It's being put into it is in a live environment right now in California, in a kitchen in Southern California. There's kind of the next slate of installations, the quantity and location of which are up to Chipotle to disclose. But we are, Chippy is to release to manufacturing, to kind of scaled manufacturing, and we'll be kind of in a medium volume position by January.
Thanks, Mike. And then the last question, and several people have asked about this, is just how we think about exit strategy. What are the plans? Are there any IPO talks? How does that affect my investment? Can you kind of talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, our ideal path of exit is an IPO, a public offering.
Right.
Okay, so two things need to be in place for that to be present. One is that the IPO markets need to be open and friendly, and it's a really challenging time in this environment for any tech company to go public. So the market conditions have to be right. The second thing is we have to be ready. And to be a good public company, you need a lot of things in place. One of them you need is predictable revenues, and we're just not there yet. We're quickly getting there. Predictable revenues meaning the pace of adoption for each one of these pilots is still being authored and decided upon. But if you fast forward a year from now, 2 years from now, the pace of rollout will be largely knowable. And in that phase of the company, we might very well be a really good public company with really predictable revenues. So we're on a race to get there.
Awesome. And for early investors, in the instance of an IPO, how would it affect investors that are investing in this round?
They get the opportunity to sell their shares in the public market, and in this kind of scenario, in theory, a very attractive gain, a very attractive price. The way that the shares work, whether it's Series C, D, E, F, whatever the series are, they all at the juncture at the point of an IPO, they all convert to common shares and become essentially for sale in the public market. So you have a buyer for your shares at an accretive price. That's the way IPOs work. So we'll do our part. I appreciate everybody's support getting there.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Mike. Really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for these great questions. Any that we weren't able to get to, we'll be responding.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, there's invest@misorobotics.com.
That's the link. Invest at MisoRobotics.
We'll get back to your questions. But thank you all. I appreciate it so much, and look forward to welcoming you as shareholders. Have a good day.
Thanks, Alan.
It's great. Okay, I mean, I think that kind of rounds things off. I think it's important to recognize that it's going to take time for this company to roll out and deploy to their different partners. Demand is white hot, as Mike has said, but I do think it is a great opportunity, and I do think that, even if one is noticing this opportunity, maybe you're seeing this video and you're thinking it's too late to invest. I don't think it is. They haven't rolled out. They're going to be releasing more and more products. They're doing it one by one. They've got a connected ecosystem. It's a hybrid between a software and a robotics company. When it lands, it will land well. It's not I'm not a financial advisor, but I am an investor in Miso Robotics. I do think I have faith in it. I do think it's going to do well. Guys, remember to like the video. That's one way you can invest in my channel. And whoopsies. Yeah, knowledge is power, progress is everything. There will be some other videos that will be popping up shortly about Miso Robotics and other companies in the robotics space that I'm sure you'll like. All right, guys, take care and see you soon.